Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, members, for your very respectful attention to all the speakers on this topic today. This is a weighty matter. I'm glad to be up here going after Mr. Rutherford rather than before. And I'm just going to give a word of warning. I'm going to say some things that are hard. They're going to be hard to hear, and frankly, they're going to be hard to say. But I feel like they need to be said because I haven't heard anyone say them yet in this chamber. I want to thank my colleagues' leadership on this issue, Representative Trantham, Representative McCravey, Representative Magnuson, and many others who came even before us, who have held the line on the life of the unborn. I can't help but think about a certain person when we're debating whether Planned Parenthood should receive any state funding. I can't help but put that in context of what has happened for the last several years. And I can't help but think about a certain person who in Texas went to work for an abortion clinic, a Planned Parenthood center, worked hard, rose up through the ranks, thought she was doing right by the mothers that came in, the confused, hurting young women that came in their doors every day. I can't help but think about how this lady rose through the ranks, eventually became director of this center. And then on September 26, 2009, due to the center being shorthanded on staff, she was called into the back room to help with a procedure for the first time in her life. She was there in the room. She witnessed as a 13-week-old unborn baby fought for its life during an ultrasound-guided abortion. This infant, and she saw on the screen, it had a head, it had arms, it had legs, it had fists, it had a beating heart. It evidently had enough of a neurological and brain function to sense that it was in danger. And it fought for its life unsuccessfully. When I think about this story, which was enough to make Abby Johnson, as the director of a Planned Parenthood clinic, give it up, turn her back on it, and quit. And to go even further and fight through legal battle after legal battle and eventually become one of the leading pro-life voices today. But when I think about what she witnessed, and I dare say if any of you in this room had been in that room and saw what she saw, you would get a sick pit in your stomach, as I do when I think about it. And it's the same sick pit, sick feeling I get in my stomach when I think about other atrocities that have happened in our nation. Things like, as I was scrolling through Facebook recently and I saw something reminding me, we just wrapped up Black History Month, and I saw once again the heartbreaking story of the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. And I get a sick pit in my stomach when I think of what happened to those people, thinking that they were receiving health care, but instead were receiving an experiment that cost them their health. I think about the wrong that was done to my Cherokee ancestors, unless anyone think that I'm trying to pull an Elizabeth Warren here. I'm not. I have 1/8 on my father's side and 1/8 on my mother's side, but I do not claim to be Cherokee. But nevertheless, it breaks my heart when I think of how these folks were uprooted, known as the civilized tribe, just because they were Indian, marched across the nation, many of whom did not survive the trip. I also get a sick pit in my stomach when I think of all the Baptist pastors across the South during the civil rights era who tried to tell Martin Luther King to quiet down and tell your people to use more respectful tactics, all the while aiding and abetting a corrupt, racially motivated Jim Crow type of government. It makes me sick when I think of that. I can't help but think that the man Martin Luther King Jr. himself must be rolling in his grave to look at the fact, and if he could see that today, thanks to Planned Parenthood primarily, African Americans are disproportionately targeted for abortion services. This one such victim of this was none other than Martin Luther King's own niece, Alveda King, who is today a strong pro-life activist. Her story goes back to Margaret Sanger, the mother of Planned Parenthood. Initially was called the American Birth Control League. Many African Americans at the time were skeptical of white women peddling birth control in their communities, and for good reason. In 1922, Sanger said, "We are paying for and even submitting for the dictates of an ever-increasing and unceasingly spawning class of human beings who never should have been born at all." Her colleague at the American Birth Control League, T. Lothrop Stoddard, went even further and referred to Asian peoples and American Indians and American Negroes as barbarian stocks that needed to be excluded from America. None other than Adolf Hitler himself looked up to this guy, patterned his policies in Nazi Germany after this guy's writings. By 1942, this was becoming increasingly well known worldwide. The American Birth Control League, led by Sanger, made the decision to change the name to Planned Parenthood. This is the organization that we're debating today. In as many as 30 states, as late as even the 1970s, thousands and thousands of black females, including many teenagers, were sterilized by state-run eugenics boards, often without consent, if they were deemed feeble-minded or incapable of raising children. Miss King, Alveda King, was one such victim. So I get a sick pit in my stomach when I think of an unborn baby, one of the 5,000 or 6,000 every year that are terminated right here in South Carolina. Perfectly viable, mother perfectly viable, just inconvenient that they're not allowed to live. Folks, I want to suggest to you that the dichotomy between pro-life and pro-choice is a false one. You're either pro-life, and I say this with all due respect and with all grief, you're either pro-life or you're pro-death. You can be pro the unborn life. You can be pro the born life. Yes, we need to be consistent. You can be pro-life of the mother. Yes, absolutely. We have to be consistent. And it's not my job as a politician by any means to say that a mother that has to decide between her life and her baby's life, that I get to make that decision as a politician or a member of this state. No way. That's between her, God, her doctor, her husband if she has one. The issue here is that no mother has the right to take an innocent and viable unborn human life. And folks, I understand the points that have been made that the dollars that are appropriated in family planning that go to Planned Parenthood for family planning doesn't directly fund abortions. It's not the abortion services per se that are being funded directly, but anything I would suggest that keeps the lights on furthers and enables this heinous practice.